Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and this is episode 174 of the Forge of Freedom. I'm trying something a little different this evening. I'm live streaming for the first time. I'm actually testing the various channels for live streaming because, as you'll might as well discuss a little bit more here briefly, that is my father, Mike Ooley, and I will be at the NRA annual meeting in Atlanta in a few weeks, live streaming from the show. And we'll have 3 hours a day while we're down there on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday live streaming. So I'm taking this opportunity to test the live streaming channels. I'm going to attempt to live stream on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook simultaneously, and hopefully you can catch us on that live stream. And of course, the live stream will be recorded and uploaded as a podcast after the fact, but there will be some delay in that podcast getting uploaded, likely the day after it's recorded. So anyway, that's the big news here. I want to just take this opportunity in this episode to number one, make that announcement, to talk a little bit about the NRA annual meeting, which of course we've discussed in previous episodes. In fact, last year we did a recap about the NRA annual meeting in Dallas. And like I said, we'll be in Atlanta this year. Actually, it's a new for us, the live streaming, but it's also something new that the NRA is doing. They're going to have a media row, which they are calling the Voices of the Second Amendment. And we were invited to take part in that, and we're happy to do it. We'll be there Friday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., and Sunday morning from 9 a.m. until noon. And we're lining up. We're in the process of inviting guests to join us on the live stream. We will, of course, talk about our own experience and the time that we have on the air without guests, but we're going to fill up a lot of the time with guests who are there in attendance at the show. In fact, just this past weekend, I was at a Friends of the NRA banquet here in Southern Indiana. In fact, it's the largest banquet of its kind in the country and regularly attracts over 1,000 attendees. Last year raised well over $300,000 for youth shooting sports, and this year I'm sure was close to the same. Had great attendance at Huber's Orchard and Winery here in Starlight, Indiana, just a few miles up the road from where I grew up. And in fact, I got to meet a few of the current board members on the NRA board of directors. Charlie Hill-Toonen, who is, of course, up for re-election again this year, running as a reform candidate. And I also met the executive vice president of the NRA, Doug Hamlin. We were at the same table at the event, so I got to chat with him for a little while. And of course, that was a big advancement for the reform movement last year when Doug Hamlin was elected over Ronnie Barrett, who was, of course, the establishment candidate for the executive vice president position. So anyway, I look forward to speaking with Charlie Hill-Toonen down at the NRA annual meeting on the live stream, and as well as Doug Hamlin. So I hope you'll get to tune in for that and hear those conversations. So one thing I want to share my screen here about the NRA annual meeting, just briefly, and I'll keep this episode relatively short. Like I said, I'm primarily testing out the live stream settings to see how those work with the recording software that I use. But the NRA annual meeting, like I said, is going to be in Atlanta. It's April 24th to the 27th. And I've pulled up the homepage here for the NRA annual meeting. It's at NRAAM.org. And if you go to the events page and you scroll down a little bit, there's a Voices of the Second Amendment page, and our information is down there. You'll see that Bearing Arms, the Cam & Co. is going to be there, Gun Talk, Michael Bain, Rob Beckman with the Firearm Trainers podcast. I've been on his podcast and vice versa. He's been on the Forge of Freedom, and Charlie Cook. And then the Forge of Freedom you'll see there as well. If you click on the Forge of Freedom, it takes you to our website. But if you click on the booth number, you'll see we're in booth number 662. It will show you a map of the convention floor with all the exhibitors, including where our booth will be, which should be relatively easy to find. It is going to be near a large food court, not far from the Kubota tractor and Magpul booths, and then, of course, close to the Gun Talk booth and the Michael Bain and Bearing Arms booth. So we should be relatively easy to find there on the floor, although you'll see it's a massive convention, and we're kind of if you go in the main entrance in the back left corner there near that main food court. So if you're in Atlanta, if you're able to make it to the convention, we'd love to see you down there. Don't hesitate to stop in and say hello. Like I said, we will be there, Mike Ooley and I. We will be there 3 to 6 on Friday and Saturday and 9 to noon on Sunday. The other thing I want to point out, I've done, for any of you who have been following the podcast for any length of time, I've done a number of episodes about the NRA, the turmoil, the internal politics that have been going on there, as well as some episodes about the lawsuit that the NRA has been facing in New York, which came to a resolution with a jury verdict against the NRA last year. And the NRA board of directors and its leadership have been trying to grapple with the consequences of that, and the reform effort has been underway. But there are a number of reform candidates running again this year. Last year, there were the 4 for Reform, who obviously ran on a platform of saving the NRA, of reforming the NRA, of getting rid of a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse that has been at the forefront in recent years, and restoring the NRA to a leader in the right to keep and bear arms, in the movement to protect the right to keep and bear arms. Of course, the NRA has taken lots of flack over the years for some compromises that they have made, but nevertheless, I think the NRA is an important organization to augment and potentially lead many of the organizations in protecting the right to keep and bear arms. And those episodes that I've recorded before, I've created a playlist. If you go to the Forge of Freedom page on YouTube, I've created a playlist there for the NRA, and you can see all of the episodes I've done with various board members, with potential board members. John Richardson there, he's running as a reform candidate. Teresa Einacker is running as a reform candidate. Amanda Suffolcool is already on the board and helping to get more reform candidates to bolster the reform efforts on the board. So go back and check out some of those episodes if you're interested in some of the history there and what's going on at the NRA. Finally, I'd like to announce one other thing before we bring this episode to a close. Of course, so many people at the forefront of the news, it seems like in the last few days, has been the tariffs that have been imposed by the Trump administration. And there's a lot of noise around that conversation and a lot of bad information, a lot of good information. And I want to try to help you sort through some of that information with an episode. I've invited an economist, his name is William Anderson, to join me on the show to discuss tariffs as a broad concept, and then also tariffs as they've been implemented by the Trump administration. William Anderson is a senior editor at the Mises Institute and a retired professor from Frostburg State University. And he has a master's in economics from Clemson and a PhD in economics from Auburn. So I hope that he'll be able to bring some insight into the mechanics of tariffs, which are truly just a form of taxation, but also, to bring some academic perspective, some theoretical perspective, but also to help us bring some practical perspective about how these work, why people should care, and what effect they may have on your life in what I would call plain English. As an attorney, the attorneys often get a lot of flack because they speak in legalese. I think economists often do the same. They speak in highly technical terms, often unnecessarily. And I want to try to bring some light, shed some light on the tariff conversation in plain English. So tune in for that. That'll be coming out next week, hopefully, as episode 175. All right, everybody. I hope that this live stream has come through smoothly. If not, I'll be testing it. I'll likely be testing it again here in the future anyway, in the near future, to get ready for the NRA annual meeting. And again, we'll be down there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, April 24th to the 27th, Friday 3 to 6, Saturday 3 to 6, and Sunday 9 to noon as one of the voices of the Second Amendment. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I look forward to the conversation about tariffs next week, and I hope you'll tune in for that. And if you can make it to the NRA annual meeting, great. If not, be sure to stay tuned for the live stream from that event. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us spread the message of freedom. As always, feel free to comment. I try to respond to as many comments as possible to engage in the conversation with our audience. And because that's really what this is about. It's about learning for myself, holding myself accountable, and about learning from each other. So with that said, remember, until next time, you are the forge of freedom.